Hello and welcome to episode 10 of Sloan the Record, recording on February 21st, publishing on February 23rd, 2025. My name is Nathan Sloan and I'm joined once again by my father, Ron. Each week we're going on the record about family history, and along the way we'll see if we can't learn more of the people, traditions, values, and stories that made us, all while opening a window for everyone else to see a little slice of life in rural North Carolina. New episodes are published on Sundays, and we appreciate every listener. You can make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or the Podbean app. Hey, Dad, thanks for joining me on a daytime recording this time.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So the big news for this episode is the arrival of my son, my first child, whom we have named Ronan Sloan. He was born 2 weeks ago from today, as we're recording this. And good news is that Emily is doing well, and so is Ronan. We actually just got back from his second pediatrician visit today, and he had gained 8 ounces since his birth weight. So he's now at 9 pounds, 4 ounces. And they said he was doing super well with his feeding and that we actually didn't need to wake him up every 3 hours. So if he starts sleeping longer in the evenings, we can just let him continue to snooze. So that is great news. We were thrilled to hear, as you can imagine, as tired as we are and wanting him to sleep as long as he possibly can. So, the goal for this episode is just to capture a snapshot in time for Ronan one day to come back and listen to and see what he and his parents were going through during and right after his birth. So Dad and I are reversing roles a little bit in this episode. He's going to be asking me questions, and then I'll do my best to fill the airtime with some kind of thoughtful reflection on this major life moment. However, I think leading up into this, I had kind of envisioned or imagined that this episode would be some, very dramatic, well thought out piece that we would do, that I'd say all the right things and collect all the correct information, and it would just be curated perfectly. But the reality of parenthood has hit me pretty hard, as it does most folks, and I'm just lucky to be here having an episode at all to record. So this is it. We're doing it in one take, and what we get is what we get. It's not going to be everything that I want to say probably, but it will be an accurate reflection of what I'm going through. So we're going to take what we can here. Before we get into Dad's questions, just a couple of podcast housekeeping notes. We're going to try our best to finish out this season. We've got 6 more episodes of biography for Dad's life left. So those episodes may be a little bit shorter than they have been leading up to this, just because I've got to find time to squeeze in not only to record these episodes, but then to edit them afterwards. So a shorter episode is less work on the back end as well to get published. So appreciate you understanding that. We are also looking already, with 6 weeks left, toward what a potential second season might look like. So with this season being a biography, largely chronological, we're considering doing a second season now with a new grandson and son here with Ronan, maybe some life lessons, some wisdom to pass down, not just Dad, but some of my limited wisdom, whatever I have, to be able to pass down as well. But who knows? If you're a regular listener and you have some ideas, feel free to reach out to us at sloantherecord@gmail.com and tell us what you think. And finally, I do hope to welcome Emily back for a second bonus episode in the coming weeks to record her side of the story of Ronan's birth. So stay tuned for that. I'd be willing to bet her take is more interesting than mine, so you don't want to miss it. All right, that's everything that I have to say. So, Dad, take it away. What have you got for me?
Okay, well, we started out the podcast kind of when you found out that y'all were expecting Ronan, and we were you were interested in a comparison of what I was going through and thinking, and what my frame of mind was as I was expecting you to come into the world, and what's going on with you as you're expecting him to come into the world. And so I think the first thing here I'd like to ask is, now that you've been a father for almost 2 weeks, be tomorrow.
Nope, today is 2 weeks, actually.
Today is 2 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, by the count of days, right?
Hi, this is Nathan in the edit. Dad was actually right here. I don't know why I thought I would have a better grasp of the days. So this was recorded one day before 2 weeks from Ronan's birth.
But the first question I was going to ask is, after being in place now for 2 weeks, how different is life?
Very well. Obviously different. It's a bleary-eyed struggle for survival for us. Maybe the best example of what you're talking about, and I don't know what your other questions are, so I may be stealing questions as I go through some of these, but right before he was born, I think in the episode I did with Emily, the bonus episode, I said that I felt unprepared, that I was unprepared for the challenges that is, what we're going through right now, learning how to do everything as you go and feeling tired and sleepless and delirious at times. But I was also unprepared for the high points as well, and how I might feel joy and happiness. And I guess in that aspect, I was very correct to assess myself as being unprepared, because I was unprepared. But in the same token, I think the people around us, one of the things at the pediatrician's office today was asking is, do you have a good support system around you? You have a good family around you? And I said, yeah, we've got lots of folks around us. We had, of course, the baby showers where people got us stuff, and we had family members who came and helped out in the first days here at the house. Todd and Angela were here, and just had an outpouring of love and support from family and friends as well. People checking in, some folks I hadn't talked to in a long time, just seeing the news and reaching out and saying, hey, if there's anything I can do, or we're thinking of you, or we're praying for you. So I was also unprepared for how much this changeover in life means to other people. And when you're going through it, I think they can relate to you in a new way that they weren't able to relate to you before. And that was just very rewarding to see so many folks reach out and offer support, and not necessarily advice, because everybody knows there's as much different advice as there are people to give it. But I didn't get a lot of that, like, hey, you should be doing this or that. Instead, it was just, hang in there, you'll make it. We're here for you if we can do anything. People have been giving us meals. People have been dropping off food. So all of that support has been made us feel very loved in a time when we needed to feel loved, and when we're experiencing love for a new person in a way that we hadn't before. But yeah, I had a situation shortly after he was born. I couldn't go to his first pediatric visit. And I'll preface this by just saying it's different for everybody what the experience of birth is like, but it was a roller coaster ride for me, and emotionally. And there was a period where they had to go, her parents, Todd and Angela, took Emily and Ronan to the pediatric appointment, and I had to go to a different doctor appointment, so I wasn't there. And I was driving myself around Cary, which we used to live in Cary. After the doctor's appointment, I went to Jersey Mike's to get a sub. And I guess I'm just driving around Cary like I always have. And everything felt like it did 2 weeks ago before he came. And and as I was pulling into the parking lot to get lunch, it just occurred to me, oh, I'm a dad. Like, he's not here right now, but it's kind of snapped me out of it. It was like for a second I had gone back to not being a dad. I was driving around in the car by myself, and then it just occurred to me that I was a dad, and I got choked up and started crying in the car, which, I'm sure I'll have other moments that I'll share here that were emotional. But it was a weird feeling. It was just not a bad feeling, but just a strange feeling of, where did these emotions come from? Why does it mean something to me in the way that it does?
Well, you've gone through a transformation.
Yeah. So I don't know if I answered your initial question with that. What was your... initial question again?
Just how is life different? Was the initial thing, and I think you've covered that, and we'll have some more of that coming up in the other questions, I'm sure. Another one I was going to ask you was, you had 9 months to anticipate this, and during that time, I'm sure you had a lot of people telling you things that might have shaped your preconceptions of what it was going to be like and so forth. But how have the things we've talked about earlier in terms of preconceptions, how close were they to what reality is at this point, or how have they differed?
As much as possible, I try not to have expectations. And I know that you were one of the people that was building up expectation for me. Not the only one, but there were a lot of people. I would hear you say several times, "Oh, you're just not ready. You're going to love this kid so much," that sort of thing. And you probably heard me go back to you like, "Okay, well, we'll see." I'm not going to buy into the hype. I just wanted to experience it for myself and not build up any expectations, because I don't think I wouldn't want to be disappointed if my expectations weren't met. I would rather just go into it kind of blind as you can go, because you do your entire life hear what it's like to have a kid and in different people's perspectives, but nothing can really prepare you for it. So why even try, other than the practical things that you can do, making sure you have diapers stocked up and wipes and the car seat ready to go and all that kind of thing. And all of those expectations were met. All the practical ones, I was going like, wow, I'm glad I learned how to do this car seat beforehand so that we're not trying to figure it out here on the 4th day leaving the hospital. So, I didn't have any. I knew that it was going to be special, and it was more special than I could have imagined. So I'm glad that I didn't spend a whole lot of time trying to imagine it, because it just would have been time that I could have spent doing something practical, trying to get ready.
Did you find that people that you talked to, especially friends that had kids ahead of you, did you find the majority of them saying, "Oh, you just wait," sort of like they had really been through something, or did you find most of them on the positive side?
It's a good mix of both. I definitely have friends that are like, grit your teeth and get through this because it's going to be a nightmare until they're X age, or until they can sleep through the night. You may as well just hang it up. One guy told me basically it was like getting pushed into the deep end. Like you're just fighting to swim and struggle and keep your head above water. And maybe those are people who didn't spend enough time with their expectations. Because I can imagine how if you were kind of just thrown into it and no one had prepared you at all, it might be shocking and surprising how much you have to reorient your life in a 24-hour period, really, to working on focusing on somebody else's life. But it wasn't that difficult to me. I don't want to toot my own horn and say, "Oh, I'm great and so selfless and whatnot." But just the way my brain works. And Dad, you may have seen this with me in the workplace. If you put me in a quiet room and leave me to my own devices, I'm not working as efficiently as if you put me on a shoot and there's a timeline and people are coming and going. And if you're not staying on the schedule and getting the shoot done, then you miss the shoot and you make the client mad or whatever. In a high pressure situation, I tend to be less in my head and think less about myself and what I'm going through, and just I'm reacting to the environment and the things around me. And that's kind of where I'm vibing. And it's the same way with the baby. It's just like, there's constant getting up and down, and you think that you've taken care of the problem that's making him cry, and 5 minutes later he's crying again, and you have to get up again, and it's frustrating. But I'm not dwelling on those thoughts of frustration. I'm just keeping my head down and going through the reps and staying focused and fortunately getting to some kind of a semi-finish line where Emily and I trade off duties and I can go to sleep. So I just haven't had a whole lot of time to like reflect on how it's affected me from a negative standpoint. I'm just going through the motions, and I guess anybody
taking care of business.
Yeah,
sort of taking care of
business.
Yeah,
Staying in the flow of it. This is the first time doing this episode where I've really stopped in 2 weeks, and other than doing my journal, I have journaled occasionally when he'll fall asleep. I'll write in the journal, but this is the first time that I've really talked with someone else and reflected on that.
Well, you've already probably touched a little bit on this, but one of the things I had talked to you about was the feelings you were going to have, unlike anything you had felt before. And that involved both this little stranger coming into your life, but also with your wife, with Emily. I just wondering what things have you felt that you'd never felt before, that if that's something you can share.
Sure. As much as I can. I don't know that I'm going to capture everything, but Emily labored for 24 hours. She never fully dilated, so she was not able to give natural birth. And they told us early on the morning of February the 8th that it was going to have to be a C-section delivery. And poor Emily, I mean, I've heard this said by other dads. You're watching the mom just do all of this work and in so much pain and not able to rest. And Emily wasn't able to rest the evening of the 6th. And she wasn't able to rest, obviously, while she was laboring the evening of the 7th. So it was like, okay, she's been up for 48 hours and laboring for 24 hours. And the epidural was not the magic fix for us that some folks experience. So I was seeing her in a lot of pain and scared and battling through all of that. Hearing her, it's kind of funny, not funny, but at one point, Angela, Emily's mom, texted me and said, if she hasn't said it already, you might hear her say something like, I can't do this. And it was probably, an hour after I heard Emily say for the first time, I can't do this. Like, that's the level of desperation that she was at. And I appreciate Angela giving me some words to share because I was sleep deprived and shattered as well, and having to remember, oh yeah, I've got a job here as a cheerleader and a support person that I need to be doing. And so having that reminder was good. And that evening of the 7th was really, really challenging, trying to support Emily and seeing her struggle and seeing them put her in all of these different positions to help the baby drop that looked like medieval torture, and just feeling helpless to do anything. Getting to that point where we were in the operating room. Yeah, the night before, I put this in my journal as well, but the night before, I'm just praying and dreading, oh, please don't let it be a C-section. Like, that's the worst thing in the world, which now I know that it isn't. But still, when she's worked that hard and of course wants to do the natural birth, you want to see some kind of payoff for all of that work. And so hearing the news that it was going to be a C-section, or likely to be a C-section, there was like a 2-hour period between there. And I just had the thought come to me that I'm ready for this to be over. I'm ready for her to not be in pain. I'm not really thinking about the kid so much. I'm thinking about Emily mostly at this point. And like, hey, I know this is supposed to be a happy occasion, but right now this is the most stressed I've felt in a long, long, long time. And I just want it to be over for her. And the fact that it's going to be this unexpected C-section really unfortunately, I'm like, this is going to put a bitter twist to the whole thing. Like, it'll be bittersweet. I'm like, okay, we got our son now, but boy, was it hard to get to it. And that's always going to kind of, stain the story of this or whatever. I found that, and you know me, like I tend to be pragmatic and to the point of sometimes being negative and pessimistic, whereas you are always Mr. Optimistic, look on the bright side. So that's pretty typical for Nathan to think this way. I'm just like, I'm happy to meet him. There's no way that this is going to be a glowing, wonderful 5-star review, though, when I get done with it. And then we get in the operating room. Everyone was wonderful in the operating room. The doctor that we saw explained to us that she had just had a child a year ago and had labored just about as long as Emily had, and had actually gotten to the point of pushing for like 4 hours. And she's like, I had to do a C-section. She's like, I know it's tough. I know what you're going through. I know that you hate to hear this, but it's going to be okay. And this is the best thing for the baby. And you're making the right decision here. So the whole staff, the anesthetist, hard word to say, and the delivering doctor and all the staff there were just wonderful during that, what was a sleep-deprived, delirious, highly emotional, and scary procedure for you when you've just been thrown into it. But they do this curtain thing, and they have kind of like a translucent top to the curtain, and they say, hey, look up to see him. When we get him out, we'll hold him up so that you guys can see him. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I wasn't really paying attention. And then I hear him crying, and they hold him up. And that was, when you hear people say you're not prepared, nothing can prepare you for it. There's no other way of putting it. There aren't words. Yeah, it was just an immediate, like, oh my gosh, a new person, and he's my family. So, there's a lot of emotion there. Because I could just look at him and be like, oh, that one's mine. And now, as he's gotten a little bit older, I see much more of Emily's side in him. But, I guess it's just confirmation bias myself. I was looking at him going like, oh, wow, it's little Nathan. Immediately I'm hit with that. And I'm just like fighting back tears, like, oh, I don't want to look like an idiot in front of all these hospital people, even though I'm sure they see everybody blubber and cry all the time. But I was laughing because it was just so neat to see. It's nothing
it's just joy.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know that I've ever had a moment where I'm laughing and crying at the same time. But that is what I did for about 20 or 30 minutes there, probably. And they had me get up and cut the cord and while they were working on patching Emily back up. But then the other thing that got me really emotional was when they first brought him over to Emily to hold. And again, 48 hours sleep deprived, delirious, tired, going through surgery, which Emily doesn't even like needles to be poking her. And this whole process has shown her how strong she is and how much more she's capable of. But when they put him in her arms, I saw her go to comforting him. And that just sent me. Because it's like, oh, to see your wife become a mom right in front of your eyes, was really, really special. And she took to it like a duck to water. Just the things that she was saying were things that I always heard Mom say to me, like when she was trying to comfort me. So it was just a really cool thing to be able to see. And yeah, to answer your question fully, I guess you definitely do have a new respect for your spouse or your mother of your child when that happens, because it is a lot of work. It's a whole lot that we men don't have to go through. And it is a very being a mother especially is very sacrificial, very selfless thing. It's much more demanding on them, although it has been demanding on me, but it's much more demanding on them. And to see Emily just swoop in and have her focus be on nurturing and caring for Ronan immediately was just so special and such a gift.
Yeah, she is. She's amazed me just from a distance at how strong she's been, and what you've told me about the lack of complaints, and every time I've spoken to her, she's been just like, I'm doing good, I'm doing great. She's just been so positive, and that's just it's a sweet thing to see. And of course, all of this takes me back too. And part of these questions are based on looking for the parallels to what I felt and what you felt, and seeing those things. And that certainly is proven out there. And the next thing I was going to ask you, I think you probably pretty much answered, was, how much it, had affected or deepened your feelings for Emily. And you probably pretty well answered that. I don't know if there's anything else in that regard. The next question I had was, up to this point, little Daisy, the Cavapoo, has been the focus of things, and that's a joint thing. Both of you, had her in your focus. Of course, I did as well when she's here at work. How has that transitioned with her having a new little critter that's smaller than her come in that has...
Well, briefly, I do want to finish up on something that I should have circled back to, but that whole feeling of like there's no way that this is going to be 100% like going to swing around. I am genuinely surprised at how wrong I was there, because the moment that he did come into the world and we were holding him, it was like completely wiped out the last 24 hours of that fear and uncertainty and everything else that I was feeling. There's if he had been born naturally without the C-section and it had been an easy labor and all of that, I couldn't love him anymore or any differently than I do the way that it did go down for us. So I guess to finish out that kind of side of the story, it's surprised me in my own pessimism that this was able to wipe that anxiety and kind of the bad taste out of our mouths from the whole experience. That's how good it was to actually meet him. And I really was not prepared for how that would feel. But on to the Daisy question. Yes, I do think people make fun of couples that have dogs and raise them like children or whatever. Oh, you're spoiling the dog or what have you. But I do think there was some legitimate good practice in there with a dog for parenting, because when they're puppies, they are very needy. They have to go out all the time. They're yapping and barking instead of crying. They don't know what things are, and they're causing trouble, and you have to have patience, and all of that is coming into play in these first 2 weeks as parents. So very glad that we had all that experience with Daisy. She's our little trainer for those kinds of things. But no, I was quite concerned about bringing him home, because she is, especially with me, I'm kind of like her person that she's attached to. And I did not know how she would take to there being somebody else that I was giving attention to. And because she is so important to the household happiness, as many pet dog owners can attest, the greatest fear that I had was that she was not going to take well to him, and that we'd be forced to choose between dog and baby. And of course, dog ain't going to win that fight. So then we'd have to figure out what to do with Daisy if she showed any kind of aggression or anything. And in the first 12 hours of bringing him home, she went kind of crazy. She did not just instantly become this like doting little puppy just sniffing and laying next to the baby. She was very anxious dog behavior, the big wide eyes, the tail wagging crazy, but that doesn't always mean happy. Sometimes that can mean agitated, running in circles. And I spoke to you at one point just kind of concerned about the behavior because Emily was on edge about it. It was more that Daisy was just wanting to constantly sniff and be in the baby's face. Whoever had the baby, Daisy was following that person around. So if I took baby upstairs, Daisy was following me. If we took baby downstairs, she was going to shadow whoever had that baby. She wasn't going to let the baby out of her sight. I don't know if it was just because the novelty of having this new person there, or if she was afraid that this little baby was going to like hurt somebody somehow, or, she has no frame of reference for what this thing is. She just sees this thing that's making a lot of noise and moving around erratically. And things that move around erratically have never been her favorite thing. So who knows what's going through a dog's head, but we had to separate her pretty early on. And Todd and Angela stayed downstairs with Daisy and gated off the stairs so that she couldn't get upstairs to the nursery or to us. And that was nerve-wracking. And I took a lot of time with Daisy in the first 12 hours to pay her attention and let her sit in my lap and take her on walks and do all the normal stuff that we normally did, even though I'm trying to acclimate to having a baby at home, because I wanted to try and avoid that scenario where there was resentment from Daisy to the baby and then potential aggression. So, it may seem silly. I felt silly at times, like taking special time with my dog when I was bringing my baby home. But it was worthwhile because it would be traumatic for Emily and myself if Daisy hadn't acclimated well and we had to rehome her or something. So may seem silly, but I felt like I had to do my part to make sure that Daisy felt included and not excluded, because dogs pick up on that. They're very sensitive. If they're smart, Daisy's
that would actually make it worse.
It would make the situation worse if she felt that way. So I had to take care of the dog's needs. And pleased to report that after about 2 days, she did get used to it. She still gets very jealous, I think, when Ronan's in my lap. There's several pictures of her just like piled up on my lap too, trying to, get between me and Ronan. I have to move her away every once in a while, but she's much better now. She just kind of monitors him when we're doing diaper changes and he's crying. She'll stand next to the changing pad, because we do that on the floor. She'll stand next to the changing pad and just kind of like watch him, like overseeing, making sure we're doing the process well, I guess. But yeah, she's much more friendly to him and seems to be kind of accepting that this is her new normal.
Well, she's a female dog, and there's probably some maternal instincts in there. And I imagine she will sort of take ownership in him.
She's Cavalier, King Charles Spaniel, and Poodle mix. And the Cavalier part, from what I understand, they're very known to be very good family dogs and to work well with kids. And we've always seen that with Daisy when she'll go over to the Boyd's house. She loves playing with Jacob and Amelia when they want to play with her. And we had some from the Huffmans from our church came over and brought their kids just a few days ago. They dropped off food, and those kids picked up her little toy pizza and were throwing it around the house with her, and she was just having a ball. So I think she's going to be fast friends with Ronan in a couple years when he's able to toddle around and play with her. Hopefully he's not terrorizing her like some children do.
And I know when you called and talked to me about that, one of the things that went through my mind is she attaches so much to people. She doesn't want anybody to leave the room. She reminds me sometimes of that, the story of the parable that Jesus told about the shepherd can have all the sheep, but one's missing, and his focus is on the one that's missing. And that's sort of the way we can have 8 people in the room and one person go to the bathroom, and Daisy will go to the door and sit there and will not do anything with anybody in that room until the person that's in the bathroom comes back. She's kind of does that. And when you consider that y'all were gone from her for 4 days, I mean, when she sees me like overnight, just me, she gets excited to the point of having trouble breathing. And I could only imagine her seeing you and Emily for the first time. She must have been wondering what has happened.
Yeah, I would recommend, if there was a way for us to have come home and hung out with her without the baby for like an hour and just got her used to being around us and got all that excited energy out and then brought the baby in an hour later, that probably would have made things go smoother. But the combination of us being gone for 4 days and coming in and then bringing baby in probably was just more excitement than she could handle. But fortunately, looks like she's over it.
Yeah. Now, my next question is probably a little bit of a strange question for you, and I don't know. You don't have to deal with it if you don't want to, but it's just a question that I had because I experienced some of this. I wondered, has it yet affected how you look at your own parents and how you see them and things in terms of relating, or the things that kind of dawn like, wow, now I know this?
Yeah, I think especially with Mom at this point, everything that I just talked about with birthing, bringing a child into the world. I've heard you say before that you called your mom on your birthday because she's the one that did all the work to bring you into the world. And I definitely, that respect that I have for Emily, some of that transfers over to Mom as well for having carried me and brought me into the world. So I do appreciate that. I think most of the stuff that a dad does, being present and taking time with the kid, especially as they get older, probably comes a little bit later. I certainly hope that maybe if he's listening back to this 30 years from now or whatever, he appreciates that I have a headache right now because I haven't gotten enough sleep, and that I'm supporting his mom and going through all of the reps of parenting. And I'm sure you were doing the same thing with Mom as well in 1986 with me. So I do appreciate that, but it hasn't really had time to sink in yet.
Oh, yeah.
What that effect is. And financially, dads are all seemingly the ones that are always looking at the wallet and going, gosh, how is this going to hit our finances, and how am I going to be able to provide for this? So those strains are already hitting me. Fortunately, Emily gets to stay home through the summer, but we're going to have to look at daycare and those costs. And I know that it wasn't any different in 1986. Mom probably took some time off with me, and then that leaves you as the sole breadwinner earning money, and that's just a new level of stress and responsibility that gets put on you. So,
but what you'll find, I think, is I did, and it'll be down the road. You can tell me. Your priorities change so much. You go into things before children come along, and you're thinking about things more, things you want to do, things you want to have, things that are on your wish list of I want to have this or this. And then what I found was that just all took a back seat, and I realized, hey, I can do without that. You get to where you see what really matters, and it kind of to me it kind of took some of that pressure off.
Sure.
I knew people had more kids than I had in way more dire circumstances than I had, and they got along fine, and down the road reached where they wanted to go. It's the way things are supposed to be.
Yeah, Emily and I, when we first got married, we were in tougher financial straits and had to watch every penny that was coming in and going out, and shopping, sales, and just having a very strict, tight budget for probably the first 3 or 4 years that we were married. It's only been very recently that we've kind of been able to go, oh, I don't have to absolutely scrutinize everything that we're spending money on. But if we need to go back to that for a while, then we'll do that. It'll be fine. But yeah, I see that with other parents that I know that become really good at shopping at Aldi and not eating out and not taking those vacations that they usually take, and they seem to be doing fine.
Yeah. This question may be one you have not had even time to ponder, but wondered, since having him and holding him and sitting there looking at him and realizing, as you described when they held him up over that curtain there for you to see, have you had anything come across your mind that you wish to be for him that you hadn't really thought about before, but once he's here and that realization of who he is and that he's your child and a little part of you going on forward, and you talk about the responsibilities, but part of the responsibilities go beyond the provision part of it, and go into the things you want him to experience and the things you want him to feel and things like that. And
yeah, I think I've had many imaginary conversations in my car talking to him at different ages. Like, oh, this is a conversation I hope to have with him when he's 8, and here's one at 12, and here's one I want to have with 18-year-old Ronan or whatever. And that's just sort of my way of like preparing myself to dispense wisdom that I wish I had gotten. Now, whether or not he's actually receptive to any of that, or whether or not the world has changed to a point where that wisdom is not applicable in the same way that it was, who's to say at this point? But in broad strokes, the most important thing is to be there and be a support for him. As you say, he is the next generation and is a part of me, and that will go on beyond me. And so that's a special feeling. And the selflessness that you kind of fear having to have ahead of time. I'm not going to act like I'm a saint. Like, I still kind of dread all of the sacrifices that are going to be required, especially over the first few years. And I'm sure there'll be more and more tough times. But, like 2 nights ago, he was doing cluster feeding, where it was like every hour he wanted more food, and you would feed him, and then and Emily was asleep. So I would feed him and then try to put him asleep, and he'd start crying again. And then, I have to change his diaper, and then feed him again. And it just went on like that for about 2.5 hours. And at the end of that 2.5 hours, I've been awake for over 16 hours, and I'm tired, and he just won't stop eating and won't stop crying. And I'm so frustrated. And I just have to remind myself, pause, take a break, look at his face, how cute he is. And he doesn't know any better. He's just communicating his needs the only way that he knows how. And I want to be this tired and to sacrifice to take care of him. And that in and of itself is kind of cool. And that kind of recentered me and got me back to a positive mindset about the whole caretaking situation. And hey, I know that there's going to be times where that recentering isn't going to work, and I'm going to continue to be frustrated. But maybe to answer your question, it's similar to the feeling I guess you have, like I mentioned with Emily when she was going through labor pains. And like, I'm not Emily, I'm not feeling those pains, but I love Emily, and I want her to not have to experience them, and I want her to be through it and on the other side of it. And I feel like I'm going to have the same relationship with this person that I did not know 2 weeks ago. Now I'm going like, if he's going through hard times, they're my hard times. And yes, I'm going to take ownership of that and help him through it. Which is not something that I have to consciously remind myself to do. It's just an instinctive thing that's kind of neat.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that will probably get you to understand even things you might have experienced or been frustrated with, like going into this, much less things you went through in life, like when you went off to college and, and I would call you or check on you. Or I told someone one time that it was harder to see you get your heart broken than it was to have mine broken, because I knew what was going on inside of me and I knew I was going to make it. But I didn't know what was going on inside of you. And, I wanted to fix it. I wanted to help with it. And you just feel that with children. It's strange that you would feel it with your children in a more of an intensity than you even felt for yourself, but you can.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you will. There are things, coming down the road. Sickness is another thing. I could be sick in my dorm room and, be down for 3 days, and I was just waiting for it to get over. But when one of y'all were sick, it was not that easy. And I guess it's feeling that responsibility that, you want to fix it. But it's also that level of love that you feel there too. It's interesting to hear these things, and I've heard a lot here that I haven't known before. That we haven't talked a lot about, had the chance really to even see each other that much or talk. But I appreciate you sharing here.
Sure. I probably need to get down there and see how they're doing. But I will say in closing, the name Ronan, at pretty much every time I've told somebody that knows me closely or knows you, that his name is Ronan, they go, "Oh, it's another Ron." Or, you saw the other night the other day at the dinner, that was instantly just what people assume is that it's Ron. It starts with RON, so that must have been what you were doing. And, all credit to you. You're a great dad, and I love you, but that's not what I was thinking at all. Maybe there was some element of me, because we looked it up online. I looked it up online. We had gone through if you can imagine a more traditional male name, I brought it up or Emily brought it up. Like, we went through all of them and nothing was striking, nothing was landing for weeks and weeks. And so okay, we got to use every tool that's available to us. So I go online and look for names that sound phonetically good with Sloan, and several folks were telling me, "Why don't you do Nathaniel?" I think that's in the process of coming up with names for a kid. You think, okay, can I honor somebody with this name? And that's probably why they're looking at Ronan and going, "Oh, Ron, he's trying to do that." But I always appreciated, I don't know exactly why it is, but you gave me Nathaniel instead of Ron. And I appreciated having my own distinct name and identity for my first name. You did pass down Truett. But I didn't want to do a junior situation. And Emily agreed and respected that. And so if you're not naming the baby after someone, then you start looking at, well, what are the names that sound good to us? And a lot of the names that sound good to us are very popular names. Like, I like the name James. I like the name Henry and Benjamin, kind of these old staple names. But they're all very popular right now. And that's a thing that, with Emily having a very popular name, not that it's a bad name. We love Emily. It's a great name. But she always had like 2 or 3 other Emilys in the same class as her. And that gets old, not knowing who's talking to who when. So we wanted him to have a little bit of a distinct name. So going through the list of online names, I probably did consciously or subconsciously at some point. I think I searched for N names. Like, is there another name that starts with an N? Maybe it's not Nathaniel. And I probably also searched for R names, thinking, well, that would be a nice nod to Dad if I could find an R name that sounded good. And came across that one, Ronan. But for whatever reason, it did not occur to me that, because the vowel sound of the O is ro instead of ra. Wow. It just didn't occur to me that it started with RON until after I told Emily, and Emily perked up at it. And I went, well, this thing has legs. Maybe this will actually work. And it was only later that I realized that it was RON. And in a way, that's almost nicer, that it was just serendipitous that happened. And Emily's grandfather on her mother's side is also a Ron. So there's some nice tie-ins there on both sides. And because he's Truett, which I was honestly kind of okay with not passing on Truett, Emily liked it so much, though, that she wanted to make his first name Truett for a while, and I just couldn't get over that was my middle name, not a first name, that whole thing. It's a very pretty name. I think it'd be a good first name, but it was a mental hang-up for me that I just was like, I can't think of it as a first name. I probably would get over it if we had, but this way he gets to keep Truett, and he can use it if he wants to in the future. But yeah, he's got RTS, so that's a nice little serendipitous. If you've got anything with initials on it that you want to pass down to him, feel free to do that. But no, it's hope that it ends up being a good name. You question a million times. You don't want to give them a name that somebody's going to make fun of them for, or is weird or whatever. But so far, people have been able to pronounce it and know how to spell it, and so it's not had any issues. But I did want to cover what's in the name, where it came from, and it's not the most popular name right now, but it's getting more popular. We'll see if it ends up being more popular in the future, or if it ends up being what I hoped it would be, which is a truly distinct name that he doesn't run into that often, just like I don't run into that many Nathaniels. So that's been a cool thing. But yeah, thanks for coming up with those questions for me. We'll go ahead and wrap things up here.
I'm thinking that, I'm trying to consider whether to change my name to Ron or pronounce it. I don't know what that would be, if that would be an English pronunciation or a Scottish Ron. But or go talk to her granddad and see, if he's up to that too. We just both change it to that, or whether to call the little guy Ronan. That's my other option.
I don't think Ronan has the same ring to it.
You got to say it with a Scottish accent, Ronan.
Well, thanks for joining us. I hope that this has been somewhat enlightening as to what the experience was like. But if you are listening to this and you've not had a child yet and you're planning to have a child, it's a totally different experience for everybody. So I do think I was served well by trying to keep my expectations low and then going into it and just experiencing it for what it is and enjoying it for what it is. And it's a great experience. It does feel like sort of a whole new club is unlocked. People kind of look at you differently, and there's knowing nods that strangers give you, like, oh, I remember those days, those kind of things. So I feel kind of like I got a foot in both worlds of the pre-kid world and the parent world. It's a strange but fun place to be. And yeah, we're looking forward to what those next steps in parenthood look like, and maybe we'll capture a few more of those. Again, hoping in the next few weeks to have another bonus episode where I talk to Emily and get her insights into parenthood as well. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, enjoy your time, because my time is going to be spent mostly awake and delirious. So enjoy your time, maybe a little bit more, knowing that you're getting your 8 hours of sleep.
Well, it seems like you're doing better than you think you are to me.
Yeah, I'm doing. I think I'm mentally doing better than I am physically, because I'm going like, oh, this isn't that bad. I'm keeping up with things, and then I just find myself falling asleep at like noon on the couch, and my body is telling me, actually, you are very tired. You need to sleep. So,
well, what you need to do is bring him over to the baby whisperer at the house. Between the two of us, y'all could go upstairs and each take a bedroom and sleep long as you wanted to and give us a bottle.
Hey, that sounds like a plan. We'll plan on doing that soon.
Oh, man.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks for joining us. Hey, this is Nathan in the edit. I wanted to jump in and share something that was shared with me by April Culver, who's a friend of ours. And she pointed out that Ronan is not only just Ron at the front, but you could look at it as a blend of Ron and Susan. And I thought that was just such a cool thing that I also had not considered. And if you've been listening, you know that the episode before this one was all about how Dad and Mom met. And so I'm going to steal that one from April and just say Ronan is Ron and Susan put together because it's a better story for the name than the one that I actually have. And finally, I thought, why not let Ronan speak for himself? So, Ronan, why don't you take it away just a bit here to close us out?